In September 2004, the International Churchill Society of the United Kingdom, in partnership with the International Churchill Society of Canada and the Churchill Centre in the United States, held the 21st International Churchill Conference in Portsmouth, England, to celebrate the 60th anniversary of one of the greatest military endeavours in history, the attack on the coast of Normandy, France, by the combined forces of the United Kingdom, the United States and Canada, and forces from a number of countries then under German subjugation. Known as the flagship city, Portsmouth has been significant in English history for over 800 years. Conference attendees truly appreciated the remarkable Portsmouth story, with visits to the Royal Naval Museum, HMS Victory, the Mary Rose, HMS Warrior, Southsea Castle, Southwark House, and especially the D-Day Museum. Following the conference, they crossed the Channel to visit beaches of Normandy before going to Dieppe, Ypres, Bastogne, and eventually Berlin. Delegates enjoyed a superb blend of memory and academic analysis presented by some of Britain's most distinguished historians of the Second World War, and veterans who participated in the actual events of Operation Overlord. The International Churchill Society of the United Kingdom recorded the event and invites you to order the full video. Copies can also be ordered from the Churchill Centre in Washington, D.C. Additionally, educational editions of the conference have been prepared with the assistance of the Cabinet War Rooms in London, England. You are now about to see one excerpt from this video. The first troops into Normandy in 1944 were paratroopers and other forces brought in at midnight by gliders to secure the flanks for the amphibious forces coming ashore on the beaches at dawn. One of the best known and most dramatic stories was the capture of Pegasus Bridge by the Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry, the Ox and Bucks, led by Major John Howard. Much of their success of capturing the bridge within only 10 minutes was due to the pinpoint landing beside the Orne Canal of 3 gliders. One of those glider pilots, Geoff Barkway, told his heroic story to an enthralled audience with great humour.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'll start off by giving you an idea of how we got trained, what the glider pilots were like, and then we'll go more into the detail of the operation itself. The airborne forces really started in April 1940. This is a river on the Belgian border, and it was where the Germans had decided to make the breakthrough, but you can see it was overlooked by this fort. These are the walls of a fort. But the Germans wanted to come across here, so they'd obviously got to get rid of that fort. And they did it by landing gliders in the middle. And if you can see these little sort of blotches here, they are in fact gliders that landed inside the bounds of the fort, captured it, cleared the way for the Germans to sweep across the river and move on into France. And of course you all know what happened after that. Well, this caused consternation amongst the British camp, and Churchill gave the edict that we will have airborne armies, airborne forces. And so they were to comprise gliders and paratroops, and they all started building up at the beginning of 1940. I joined them in August 42. We were all volunteers as glider pilots, came from all regiments of the British Army, and we were posted to this new regiment, glider pilot regiment. And for 6 weeks, from whatever regiment we'd come, and I was a Royal Engineers running railways and trains and maintaining steam locomotives, we were turned into tough fighting infantrymen, ready to do anything once we got to the scene of the operations. We were taught to fly powered aircraft, first of all, the little Tiger Moths and a Miles monoplane called a Magister. We went on to these little 7-seater gliders, and were taught to fly those, and then we moved on to this one, the Hawser, which was the main one of the airborne forces. 88-foot wingspan, 64 feet front to back, nose to tail if you like, tricycle undercarriage, and we could carry 29 troops, or a jeep and a light gun, or jeeps and motorbikes, or anything up to 6,000 pounds payload. We could carry that. And I say this was the main workhorse of the airborne army to carry the troops. That's a picture of the cockpit layout, very, very basic, as you can see. Control columns, rudder bar at the front there. We had a very rudimentary instrument panel. We had an altimeter, an airspeed indicator, a turn and bank indicator, a compass, and a thing there called a blind flying instrument. We termed it the angle of dangle, because you see, the trouble was, you were on the end of a 300-foot tow rope, and when we were being towed, we had to keep formation on the tug. If you got out of position, you pulled his tail up, or pulled his tail down, or pulled it to one side, and usually they got very upset, and there was a telephone cable wrapped up in the tow rope, and the pilot would call up and say, "Would you mind getting into position?" or words to that effect. You know. So what was done was the tow rope came back as one rope, and about 20 feet in front of the cockpit, it divided into two, and it was fastened one under each wing. And from the centre of the knot where it split, they had a piece of bungee elastic, and it came back, and there was a rod projected out of the back of that instrument there, and they fastened this to the elastic. And then as you flew behind the tug, if you were in the correct position, there were two needles in that instrument there, one horizontal and one vertical. Now, if you could keep those needles crossed exactly in the middle of the dial, then you knew, although you might not be able to see the tug if it'd gone into cloud or something like that, but you knew you were roughly in the right position. Didn't work. or not very well. And it had one sort of rather annoying fault, that when you released from the tug, you pulled a lever down here and the tow rope released. This bit of elastic, which was fastened to the tow rope by a big snap fastener, would get longer and longer and longer until it gave up the ghost, said enough of that, flew back, punched a hole in the perspex of the cockpit, and you got air conditioning whether you wanted it or not. So we found that they weren't very good. Now, I said we had jeeps. We used to carry jeeps and things, and this was the rather sort of heavy method of getting it in. We're on the preparations for the operation. All the gliders were towed up to one of these ramps, which was positioned round the field. The jeep would be driven up the ramp and stopped in the doorway there. There's a doorway which would take the ramp. And working together, the team of men would start bouncing it on its springs. And every time it came up in the air, you turned it a bit more, and you turned it a bit more, and you turned it a bit more, until you got it lined up to drive down the body of the glider. Now, then on the floor, you'd put metal troughs, which the wheels would ride in, and you would push this down the glider to the end as far as it would go, and there it waited.